Mark, thanks very much for being on stage with us.
Thank you, Ben.
So we're here together on stage because AWS and Talend are very close partners. We're working on delivering projects to clients, to thousands of clients throughout the world. And Talend, we are a software provider for data governance, data quality, and data integration solutions. And we believe in data health. So what's data health? Data health is the health of your data, the health of your organization as my health is my future. So it's that your future, how healthy is your future as an organization. And at Talend, we believe that data health is where companies' data support its business objectives. So we never start a project or discussion with a client without understanding the end game. What is the value we need to deliver with the team for the business? So there's a lot of things we can unpack within that health discussion. That's what we're going to do. We'll try to do with Mark for the next 15 minutes. If during that discussion you got some question in your mind, some questions spark in your mind, some ideas, hold those questions. We'll give you some time to ask those questions. So the last 5 minutes, we try to make it interactive as much as possible. So let's start unpacking that discussion, Mark, if you don't mind. With my first question actually being on around data as a product strategy. And we're seeing that as a product initiatives across the board within multiple organizations. But in reality, can you share with us what is the business outcome? What's the organization is looking for when they are kicking off data as a product strategies?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to start with a question. Who's heard of data mesh? Seems to be the trendy topic right now. I like to break it down a little bit and talk about data as a product. If you look at the 4 components or tenets of data mesh, they all relate to data products anyway, but data products to me is a concept that's much more digestible, manageable, and understandable. So it is a concept that we're seeing emerge, and it's emerging in response to the need for fast time to value, actually. What we've seen, in fact, in the data camp, I guess we learned a little bit from the application development camp around the concept of agile application development. Now we're looking more at agile data product development. How do we do that? We bring our data subject matter expert who wants to consume the data and use it in their day job and maybe enable their data customers, if you like, bring them close together with the data engineers so that they're working in a much more coupled way, similar to the software development lifecycle, having the developers and the business users or product owners of the software product that's going to be developed working together in that agile 2-week sprint, very, very fast cycles of testing and evolution of that product. So we're seeing, I guess, that one thing is bringing the engineers and the data product owners closer together. The data product owner then becomes an absolutely crucial success factor for being able to scale. So one of the other challenges that we're facing is once upon a time, data was the domain of IT. And if you were good enough and if you ticked all the boxes, IT would give you a little bit of permission to have a little bit of data to do something with. It's flipped almost completely, and our understanding now is really data is a business asset now. Once upon a time, maybe it belonged in IT because they were the only people who understood it. All the data literacy was within the IT organization. It's now not that way at all. So the data product owner is actually a subject matter expert who sits in the business. And they may have a data product which is around a segmentation model, maybe it's around predictive analytics for next best offer. It could be a financial-based data product where they're managing the GL or reporting on financial metrics or even fraud detection, within the accounts payable, accounts receivable area. And then the third, the driver of that evolution is time to value. So instead of, when I was the data warehouse manager at one company, we used to have a joke that the answer to every business question is 6 months and $500,000, because that's what it'll take to run a project in the data warehouse to bring that answer out. So we've seen that flip around completely now where ideally, we'll probably move on to the next question.
Yeah, I'm seeing like some people nodding in the room actually. So
I love it when people nod. It's like, yep, I'm hitting the mark. I'm getting some smiles here.
There's kind of experience there in the room. So thanks for that. So do you have any feedback on the first lesson learned on those projects actually? What does it work?
Yeah, fortunately, as a company as large as AWS, we get to see what people are doing on the cutting edge. And the lessons learned, I guess, would be the importance of the data catalog. So we were in data warehouse land, and then everybody got tired of 6 months and $500,000. So we moved over to data lakes, and the tenet behind the data lake was that you could take data from anywhere, bring it over into the data lake very, very quickly, 24 hours. They talk about landing data without thought or zero transformation, because the business just wants access to the raw data half the time. So we found a way to expose the raw data to the end user in a governed way, and we called it a data lake. And then the problem was I wouldn't say quickly, but over time, the data lake became a data swamp. The reason that happens was around business metadata management, the data catalog, the ability or the documentation, because it's actually a knowledge management challenge. The access to knowledge or information or business metadata about the data set is what enables me to use it safely. And so one of the roles of the data product owner is to manage and curate that knowledge, usually in a data catalog, so that anybody who's wanting to, number one, find a data set for a particular question or use case can search the catalog and find it. Number two, once they've found it, they actually understand what you can and can't do with it, how to use it safely, what the data quality constraints are, what the privacy constraints might be, ethical, contractual, all of those data governance things. It's actually knowledge, and it's usually tacit knowledge in someone's head that never gets captured. Once we capture that in the data catalog, we're in a much safer place, and then we can scale, because the more data products you build, the more subject matter experts you have in the business, the more data product owners you can have, and the more data products you can enable the business with to do more and more things, rather than having to throw more resources into IT to manage more and more complex data sets.
Excellent. So I love the idea of the data catalog and using what we understand well, and that what we can leverage. And you mentioned those data users. You're kind of touching on the user interface. So, but we know that the user interface in UI and consumption is a key part of the success of the projects. Can you expand a bit more on what does it mean? What does it involve? We, as organizations, are trying to get more and more users to leverage those data sets.
Yeah, I think the end user experience is an important factor to consider when a data product owner is wanting to maximize the value of their data product to their customers, their data consumers. From one angle, it's that metadata management through the data catalog. An end user needs to be able to easily find the data that they're looking for, and then ideally be able to self-serve. Click a button in the catalog that says, I'd really like access to this data. It goes through a workflow. It comes back with approval, or it comes back with a question. Or I've got a question about this data set. Who's the subject matter expert? Click on a button. It triggers a workflow that gets that question answered from the subject matter expert. So I think that aspect is quite important. And then also, a data product can be served up in a multiplicity of ways. A data product could be an Excel spreadsheet that is actually produced in the morning after the end of day processes have completed, because that's how the end user wants to consume it. That's the user experience they want. I just want a spreadsheet because I can do everything I need to in that spreadsheet. And we've been trying for 20 years to take spreadsheets away from people and give them Power
Very
BI.
much. I'm scaring when you talk about spreadsheets.
But a data product could be in Tableau. It could be a machine learning model exposing a predictive API. It could be any of those things. As long as there's an owner who can publish, hey, this is available, come and get it. This is how you can use it safely. Then to me, that encapsulates what we want to aim towards in terms of the user experience.
Okay, excellent. So we talk about the users. Let's step back a bit and talk about leadership. So on those initiatives, data health initiatives, data as a product initiatives, what's the role of the CDO? And if I can ask a kind of controversial question, isn't it the opportunity in some organization for the chief data officer to become a chief revenue officer and change, and not to report to the CIO, but to report to different people? Are we yet there?
Yeah, okay. That's an interesting question as to who the chief data officer should report to. In a mature organization, okay, so one of the key roles of the chief data officer is cultural transformation. They need to be that catalyst to drive, whatever verb you want to use, the organization towards being more data-driven or more data-enabled, supporting more data-driven decision-making, or if you're in government, data-driven policy. That's a cultural thing. And if you're going to drive that from the C-level, you cannot have the chief data officer reporting into the CIO, because it just won't happen. It needs to be a direct report into either the CEO, or the most powerful person within that organization. So if you're a 100% digital marketing organization, the most powerful reporting line might be to the chief marketing officer. If you're a financial an FSI, the most powerful position might be actually the CFO, and so you want the chief data officer reporting to the CFO because that actually gives them more power. So that's one aspect of it, but what I wanted to emphasize there was the mandate for cultural change. So the CDO has to be empowered to drive that cultural change. How they do that, enablement, education, particularly around the data product owner, I think I do want to emphasize the fact that, back in the day, and I've actually done training for companies that said, you 200 people, you're now data stewards, go and do 2 days of training, and good luck. We can't get away with that. I don't think we ever did. But when someone is a data product owner, it's quite a responsible position. They will end up managing permissions around what that data set is used for, which means that they could be liable for breaches of Australian privacy principles, for example. You need to empower and educate those people. So I think there's a role for a person. Now, in some organisations, it may be 1 full-time role, it could be 5 or 10 full-time roles, or it could be half a full-time role, is to manage the ongoing enablement, education and empowerment of the data product owners so that they're empowered to actually function effectively and powerfully within the role that they're given. So I would see the CDO as a sponsor of that initiative as well. So you end up with a data product owner who's a subject matter expert. They report with their fixed reporting line to the CFO or CMO or somewhere in the organisational metric with a dotted line into their mentor to the CDO. That's how I see it working out.
Right, it would be interesting to get the feedback from the room on this specific point and the leadership role of the CDO and the reporting line. So we talked about CDO potentially being a CRO, so meaning
I didn't answer the second half of the question. Okay, so data Chief Revenue Officer. How does the CDO become a Chief Revenue Officer? Through what we're seeing more and more of is data monetization, primarily externally, but there's also so with, I guess, one of the roles of the data product owner is what else can I do with this data set?
Yes.
Can I expose it to universities for research purposes? Can I take it to the market and monetize it through a data platform such as Data Republic was one. Amazon has ADX, which is our data exchange. You can actually put a data set in there and monetize it that way. People can, I think in fact, Amazon uploaded like 100 petabytes of data into the ADX data exchange earlier this year. So I don't even know where you get 100 petabytes from. But and it's there for, in some cases free downloading and just run your own machine learning models on it, or explore whatever patterns you want to look for in retail, or potential monetization. So yeah, the data product owner would be the catalyst for that monetization, I think.
So that's a perfect segue to the next question, Mark. Okay. Very well done. And that will be the last question before I give that to question to the floor. So if you can make a short question. So we talked about data monetizations. But data need to be safe. And some business made headlines recently about data breaches. So can you, in 1 minute, touch on the point why data governance and how data governance can help mitigate the risk on those data breaches?
Yeah, I think at one level, you need to have a permissions model that provides segmentation between the data. One of the reasons why one of the recent breaches was so bad is because somebody got some kind of super user credentials and was able to download the entire data set of everything. So if those access models are isolated a little bit, then the blast radius of a breach is restricted to that set of credentials. I think the other thing that's really important is monitoring, constant monitoring, and then machine learning models over that to detect anomalies. So who's extracting my data? Is there a pattern that I've never seen before? Suddenly I'm getting a query that is asking for graphic files, driver's licenses, passports. I've never seen a query like this in the last 6 months. Raise an alert and get somebody's attention to that. If that had been in place, we might have seen a less of a serious breach. And then there was a third point. Oh, and then your retention model. So under Australian privacy principles, you cannot retain data for longer than the business purpose for which it was obtained in the first place. So if I need your driver's license to run a credit check, as soon as the credit check's finished, that data needs to be deleted. Retention.
So I can go on for the whole afternoon with you, Mark, but any question from anyone, any reaction, any comments on what we discussed so far? There's a mic coming.
Thank you, Mark. The question is related to the FinOps model, where we are actually trying to democratize data. What is happening with the cost that's increasing as we take the data to the cloud? And till now, everything was running on-prem. There was no additional cost. But now running queries or ML, AI, ops running on cloud, it's increasing the cost. Have you experienced where you have to actually do the FinOps, where basically sending the money back to the charging back model?
Yes. I don't know whether it's more expensive moving to cloud or whether the expense just becomes more visible, because originally we would have had to just invest in massive hardware and data sets, so you're paying for the capital up front and then depreciate it, as opposed to an OPEX model where you pay as you go. But yes, for any cloud provider, if you're running queries, it should be very, very simple to tick a box that says, I want these costs allocated to certain cost centers. And that way, be careful though, because you've got to consider the implications of that behavior. I remember one of the banks implemented that kind of model, and people just stopped running long queries and experimenting. They just sat there and did their day jobs, and so innovation went off a cliff because it was too expensive. But it is a model that can work. It depends on what behavior you want to drive.
Maybe we've got time with the last questions. Any further question? Yep, please. We got a mic coming, so make sure everyone can listen.
So we were talking about data monetization and data as a product, but say for example, you're using certain or building data products for your customers, especially if you're like a B2B customer and stuff like that, right? Have you ever done with your customers where you've been able to, pass on the charges or the queries that they're running back to the customers when they're buying their platform, but then you run AI ML models and they are happy to, you have a toggle button in the product which says, yeah, I'm happy to use and see how the AI ML features work. But then do we pass on those costs to the customers as well? Yeah,
in a B2B context, I think that can work. You've simply got to look at it as a business model. And then you almost need a sales cycle. I'm going to sell you data, you're going to pay for it. Therefore, you may even need a role of like an account manager who is actually evangelizing for your data product sales process in order to secure a sales pipeline and then actually monetize the data in a very, very formal way. I think informally it's unlikely to work. And from a B2C side, what we're seeing is more of the opposite. People expect access to their data for free, and I've seen companies invest significant amounts of money in B2C facing dashboards that just allow people to dial in and look at every single line item in their spend and run some good, beautiful charts over it, even some predictive analytics. But it's all offered for free because it's part of the end consumer user experience that differentiates you from the competitor down the road who doesn't offer the same experience and detailed billing insights, as an example.
Right, thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, everyone. So we'll be outside if you have further questions, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Ben.